Right now, after we got our floors modeled in, now we can start to add some of our footings. And we added some in that back corner there, right? In that back corner. And we understand the workflow for adding continuous footings or perimeter footings when we don't have a wall, right? So if I zoom in here, I know that I'm going to want to use my thickened slab edge family by dragging and dropping, hitting my pick lines tool, and I got to make sure that 3D snapping is checked so that Revit automatically places it at the correct location. The way that family works, it wants for you to select the top edge of a floor. That's where this math makes sense, especially the depth, right? So it's a foot from the top of the floor and a foot from the top of that floor. So that would be your next step before getting to your actual footing, going all the way through and adding all your thickenings where there is not a wall, a structural wall. Why do I keep saying that? Because the workflow changes when there's a structural wall. Because here we need this thickening family to place our footing because we're using 3D snapping, right? So here is where I can go back to my structural framing and go to my grade beam here, drag and drop. Everything is still selected. And now I choose the underside of those thickenings, right? And then you can align this how you see fit. Let's align that in and align this one in. And there you go, right? At a structural wall, you don't really need the thickening. This, not that family. Come on, this family. We don't need that family to place the footing. That family just ends up becoming a filler, right? Because we're just trying to depict actual pour placement there. So let's go to the structural wall that we have in this back over here. And I'm going to hide these levels. So I'll just do a high category, HC. And we're going to go about the depth of the wall, how deep it goes into the ground with the same dimension that we did with the columns. If we select these columns, you can see that we went with the -1 foot. So I'm going to select this wall, okay, and this wall. And I'll do a base offset of -1. And to make sure that I am not modifying anything else, especially on a complicated area, I'm going to isolate these elements. Come down to your glasses and hit isolate element. Now on my project browser on the left, under continuous footing, we've been working with grade beam. I'm going to use wall foundation this time. I'm going to drag and drop and use my pick lines. And I'll just select the bottom inside corner like that. Now don't worry as to what your beams are doing. Obviously we isolated these two walls, so that beam is reacting to something else. We know that there's an elevator pit there, right? So, okay, so it looks good so far. We know based on where we selected that that beam is not on the center of the wall. So you can align that in your plan view, or you can offset these walls in your geometric position and the Y offset. I personally, I don't like to type in dimensions and values. Aside from the ones that have to do with the base of the column or the height of a wall. But when it comes to Y directions and nudging, I don't like typing in dimensions. I like Revit. I like using what Revit does best, align. So in this case is where I need to go to a level 1 plan view, level 1 plan. And if you want to turn off your CAD background, you can, but I'm going to do the same thing I did in 3D. I'm going to select this beam. I'm saying beam because that's the category, but that foundation element. I'll hover over the wall and I'll hit tab until I can select it. And it looks like that was my floor. So let me get my wall. There we go. And my foundation, and I will isolate element, IE. Now after I'm here is where I can do an align, AL, center of wall, and you can see that it doesn't matter where on this beam I highlight, it'll automatically assume I'm going to the center. I'll click on center. And same thing on the other side. So this is what I mean by having many workflows in here, because I don't want to add a beam, right, or add a foundation element. Let me restore my view. And now let's go to 3D. All right, and we'll figure out what's going on there. I don't want to add a foundation element once, go to my plan view and align, and then repeat that process. It's best that you go through all of your concrete walls, add your beams or add your foundation elements before you go through and align them all. So same thing here. If I had a million concrete walls, I'm just placing them at first, knowing that they're not dead center yet, right? And then after, I'll center them all on plan and I'll refine their actual location. So if I restore my view in plan, which I already did, you know, we can extend this foundation out based on structural drawings. So let's just assume that this beam, this footing is 4 feet wide. Let's assume it goes out 4 feet. So I'm going to draw a line, DL. And then on my options bar, I'll type in 4 feet. And then from the end of the wall, now I can extend this footing out. So trim single, TS, destination first, foundation second, okay? Okay, so where does the thickening fall into place now? Well, this is the difference in the workflows. So if I go into my 3D view and I restore my view here, HR, right here, my thickening is just a filler. And it helps with 2D representation, right? If you were to cut a section there. So this is where I can go ahead and add a thickening. If you have a thickening in your project, just go ahead and look for one. And then on your keyboard, type in CS for create similar. My 3D snapping tool should default to be on because that was the last setting we used. And I'll hit pick lines and I'll hover over that inside top edge of the floor and I'll click to place. All right, so far so good. Now let's cut a section through there. Let's go to our level 1. And let's cut a vertical section here. So you can go up here on your the top section of your Revit window, or you can go to view. Let's cut a section right through here. And now let's change the scale around, add some detail. And let me turn off my thin lines, so TL. And now you can add width to this. So let me dimension that, ME for measure. Now I'll measure right there. I just need 2 more inches. So I can just select my family here, and on the width, I add 2 inches. Okay. So this is part of the VDC aspect. You can see if I turn on my my thick lines, and let me turn off that CAD background there. You can see that it's showing us the actual sequence of construction, right? This goes in first, this goes in second, and these 2 elements would go in third. And our materials are the same materials so that Revit knows to auto join them. Now what happens over there at that patio area? So if I go back to my 3D view and let me turn off transparency for my floors, just to clear up what's going on here. So remember that keyword, on and off. So visibility graphics, and that is an override to our floors. Let's see, we got a 50% transparency. I'll just clear those overrides. You can see that based on where we first placed our click, Revit just placed a beam there. We have to refine it now. So this is where we can use our trim single tool. So let's just orbit under here a little bit, like that. We know that that thickening needs to go back, right? So I can do trim single, TS, and I need to give Revit a vertical destination for that beam, right? So I'm going to choose this step. I'm going to hover over it and hit tab until I get that vertical surface to highlight, okay? And now I have to select the portion of that beam, of that thickening that I want to keep. So I'm going to do a little orbit under and hover over that beam and just click on it. And you can see that it comes back and it's no longer just sticking out, right? And you can refine and keep adding more thickenings in here until that looks the way you need it to look. So for example, if I want to fill this part in a little bit more, I can add a thickening and select this vertical line, that inside edge of the step, because I know how the family works. It's going to start there and go in towards the wall, you know, or I can add one here. So let's try that one. Let me grab that thickening, okay? And let me do a create similar, CS. You can see my cursor change, right? Now I'll hit pick lines there. Now let's select, we know that our depth is correct, right? Because it's at 1 foot. Let me select this edge. Okay, so far so good. Now if we select that beam and we look under, there's a little gap there. Well, this is where you don't have to worry about the math. You just make this width what it needs to be until that gap fills in. Let's go to 3 feet. Still no. You can see that there's a little angle in there. Let's keep adding. 3'6". All right, so it filled it in. And now let's go ahead and isolate just this family, IE. Now you can see the hierarchy of Revit. Revit considers walls and floors more important than beams, just as far as how it categorizes things. We know what this beam really looks like, right? If I copy this beam over into empty space, that's really what it looks like. See? But Revit did the math for us. What do I mean by math? Well, the original family is supposed to have 8.15 cubic feet. The real family has 2.82 because the floor cut out what it needed, the wall cut out what it needed, and Revit automatically joined this beam with the other thickening coming the other way. So if I restore my view, HR, so Revit automatically joined this one with that one, right? And you can keep on adding more thickenings until it behaves the way you need, okay? So a note about beams in Revit, because that's what we're using, right? Let's go to this corner here. And I'm going to just isolate this corner patio with the 1, 2, 3, 4 beams there, 2 thickenings and 2 grade beams, right? So I'm just going to select this little corner condition and I'll hit isolate element, IE. This is all I'm looking at. Let's go ahead and delete these 2. And I'm going to set a transparency to my floor, just so we can kind of see what's going on. Override by element. And we'll say, look, let's just go to 50 here, just so we can see through this thing. If you're asking yourself, why not just do offsets, right? Why not just place another beam at the same spot or model it in foundation on a level 1 plan? So if I drag and drop this thing, I hit pick. and I place it the same place where the others live. And then I select my beams and I play with this offset here, -1 foot. Is that wrong? No, it's not. But look at how many steps we took, right? And you increased the room for error. Not only did you use 3D snapping to offset a beam to its original location of -3 at the start and the end, but now you added more complexity and said, yeah, but it's really a foot below that. Okay, you could still argue, but there's nothing wrong with that. My mind thinks that way. Okay, sure. But what if we now align these beams in here and align these beams here? And if we start deleting some of these guys, you can see that some of them will misbehave. What do I mean by that? Let me undo and bring these back a little bit. As far as Revit is concerned, it doesn't matter where you offset that grade beam. It sees 4 beams in the same exact place. Because if I select my thickening, you can see where the start and end points are, right? It's at the top of the floor. Well, if I select my beam, it's also at the top of the floor. So you're actually confusing Revit and you're giving yourself room for error because now your trim tool will work. Let me delete this guy. You see the behavior there? And let me delete this guy. Now let's do an align and bring this foundation in. You see how the thickening automatically assumed, oh, this is where you want me to go. Because these lines, these invisible lines and dots are really in the same plane. So Revit thinks that there's 4 beams in the same spot. And that's why if I do a couple of undos here, that's why when I deleted this beam, that thickening back there didn't know what to do. So I'm gonna hit delete here, delete. Look at how it just automatically just did some joins there that you're like, I wasn't expecting that. Okay. This doesn't happen when Revit sees that analytical line as being in a completely different place. So let's do an undo and delete both of these beams. And now we're going to replace those beams. Grade beam, drag and drop. Pick lines there. And now I'll just pick that bottom edge. You see how this thickening didn't misbehave? Because their actual analytical line, the location line, is at a completely different location than the actual beam. So if you're going to commit to 3D snapping, commit all the way through. Try to avoid using 3D snapping and additional offsets, okay? Because when we did the original offset, right, we selected the top of this patio, and then we did a -Z offset of -1. But now you're doing more math, as opposed to just letting Revit do the math by selecting 3D snapping and letting these -1'3" total figure itself out. So that's my biggest suggestion to Revit for you guys as users, to save you time, but also to eliminate headaches, is if you're going to use 3D snapping, commit all the way through, because then you can use your trims the way you want. You don't accidentally select a thickening and a grade beam and have them react, because Revit sees them as being completely different locations.